The train rattled through the American countryside, carrying its cargo of defeated men across lands they had only heard about in propaganda films. Werner Muller pressed his face against the dirty window, watching endless fields of corn stretch toward the horizon. He had expected America to look broken, starving, weak. The Nazi officers had told them America was collapsing under Jewish control and Negro riots. But the farms looked rich. The barns looked full. Werner felt the first crack in everything he believed. Beside him, young Hans Schmidt fidgeted with his broken watch. The boy was only 19, captured in Tunisia when Rommel's Afrika Korps finally crumbled in May 1943. Hans still had sand in his boots from that desert. He looked at Werner with frightened eyes. "What do you think they will do to us, Hauptmann?" Hans whispered in German. Werner did not answer. He thought about the stories. The propaganda films showed American soldiers executing prisoners, beating them, starving them in cages. But during the long ship journey across the Atlantic, the American guards had given them food. Real food, bread and meat and coffee. No one had beaten them. No one had even shouted much. Sergeant Otto Brenner sat across from them, his scarred face showing nothing. Otto was 40 years old and had fought in the First War too. He had joined the Nazi Party early, wore his Iron Cross with pride, and trusted nothing the Americans did. "They feed us to make us weak," Otto said quietly, "to make us forget who we are. Then they will break us." The train slowed. Through the window, Werner saw a sign that read Clarinda, Iowa. He had never heard of Iowa. The train stopped at a small platform surrounded by fields. American soldiers in clean uniforms waited outside. They carried rifles, but did not point them. They looked almost bored. The Germans were led off the train into trucks. Werner counted about 200 prisoners in their group. They drove through a small American town. People stopped on sidewalks to stare. Werner saw women with shopping bags, children with bicycles, old men sitting outside a barber shop. No one looked starving. No one looked afraid. The shop windows were full of goods. The camp sat outside town, surrounded by wire fences and wooden towers. But the towers had no machine guns, just guards with rifles who smoked cigarettes and talked to each other. The Germans marched through the gates into a compound of clean wooden barracks. An American officer waited for them in the center of the compound. He was young, maybe 30, with red hair and glasses. He tried to speak German, but his accent was terrible. "I am Lieutenant James Carter," he said slowly in broken German. "You are prisoners of war. You will be treated according to Geneva Convention. You will work. You will be paid. You will receive food and medical care. You will write letters home." Werner translated for the men who spoke no English. When he said the part about letters, several prisoners laughed. It had to be a joke or a trap. Lieutenant Carter continued. "You will be treated with respect if you show respect. This is America. We follow rules here." A guard stepped forward, a shorter man with dark hair and brown skin. His name tag read Rodriguez. He spoke in perfect German with a strange accent. "My grandfather came from Germany," Rodriguez said. "I will help translate. I will help you understand the rules. If you need something, you ask. We are not animals here. Neither are you." The prisoners were divided into barracks. Werner, Hans, and Otto stayed together in a long wooden building with 20 other men. Each man got a bed with a mattress, 2 blankets, and a pillow. The building had heat. It had windows with glass. It had toilets that flushed. Hans sat on his bed and started crying. "This is nicer than my house in Munich," he whispered. That night, they received dinner in a mess hall. The American cook served them beef stew, bread, butter, and coffee. Real coffee, not the burnt grain substitute they had in the German army. Werner ate slowly, waiting for his stomach to rebel, waiting for the food to be poisoned or rotten. It tasted good. It tasted better than anything he had eaten in 2 years of war. After dinner, Lieutenant Carter called the officers and sergeants to a separate meeting. He sat behind a desk with Corporal Rodriguez standing beside him. "You can write letters home," Carter said. "1 letter per week to family. We will provide paper and pencils. The Red Cross will deliver them." "What can we write?" Werner asked in careful English. "You can write about your health, your treatment, your daily life. You cannot write about military information, camp locations, or security details. That is all." Who reads the letters? Otto asked suspiciously. Someone checks them for military secrets, Carter said. But we do not care about politics. You can tell your family you are safe. You can tell them the truth. Werner and Otto exchanged looks. This had to be a trick. In Germany, every letter was read by censors. People who wrote the wrong things disappeared. People who complained about the war got visits from the Gestapo. The idea of writing the truth was meaningless. There was only what you were allowed to say. I do not believe it, Otto said after they left the meeting, but Hans looked hopeful. Maybe I could tell my mother I am alive. She thinks I am dead. The army told her I was missing. Werner lay in his bed that night, listening to men snore and whisper in the darkness. Through the window, he could see stars. Real stars, not blocked by smoke or searchlights. Somewhere across the ocean, his wife Greta was living in Hamburg, probably hungry, probably afraid of British bombers. She thought he was dead too. His last letter had been sent from Tunisia before the surrender. That was over a year ago. Could he really write to her? Could he tell her he was alive, eating beef stew in Iowa while she starved in the ruins of Germany? Would the Americans really let those words travel across the ocean during a war? Werner decided to test them. Tomorrow he would ask for paper. Tomorrow he would write the most careful letter of his life. And he would see what happened next. 3 weeks had passed since Werner Muller arrived at Camp Clarinda, and each day felt stranger than the last. He woke each morning expecting brutality, expecting the mask to slip from American faces. Instead, he got breakfast. Eggs sometimes, porridge with milk, bread with jam. The cognitive dissonance was eating him alive. The prisoners worked now. They were taken to nearby farms to harvest crops. The American government paid the farmers, and the prisoners received small wages in camp scrip they could spend at the canteen. Werner picked corn alongside Hans, while armed guards sat in the shade, drinking water and mostly ignoring them. The farmers' wives sometimes brought lemonade. Actual lemonade, cold and sweet, given to enemy soldiers working their fields. This is insane, Hans said, wiping sweat from his face. My mother has not seen sugar in 2 years. We are prisoners and we drink lemonade. The farmer, an old man named Mackenzie with hands like leather, walked over. He spoke no German but smiled and gestured that they could rest. He offered cigarettes. American cigarettes, not the harsh Russian tobacco Werner had smoked in the Wehrmacht. That evening, Werner finally asked Corporal Rodriguez for paper and a pencil. Rodriguez handed them over without hesitation, without questions, without warnings. Werner took them back to his barracks like they were made of glass that he sat on his bed, staring at the blank page for an hour. What could he say? What should he say? In Germany, he had learned to write letters that said nothing. The weather is fine. My health is good. I hope you're well. Safe words. Empty words. Words that could not get you killed. But Greta needed to know he was alive. She needed to know their son would still have a father if they both survived this war. Werner thought about his son, Klaus, who was 7 years old when Werner left for Africa. Klaus will be 9 now. Did he remember his father's face? Werner began to write in careful, small handwriting. He wrote in German, assuming someone would translate it. My dearest Greta, I am alive, and I am a prisoner in America in a place called Iowa. I am healthy. I am safe. The food is adequate, and I am not mistreated. The weather here is hot in summer like Africa, but the land is green, not desert. I think of you and Klaus every day. Please tell him his father loves him and will return when this war ends. Please write to me if you receive this letter. I need to know you are alive. Your husband, Werner. He read it 3 times. It said almost nothing. It revealed nothing about the abundance he saw, nothing about his confusion, nothing about the questions growing in his mind about everything he had believed. But it was honest about the basic facts. He was alive. He was not tortured. He wanted to hear from his wife. Hans wrote his letter with shaking hands. He wrote to his mother in Munich, telling her he was alive, begging her to respond. His letter was longer, more emotional. He wrote about missing her cooking, about remembering their apartment, about wanting to come home. He did not write about the lemonade or the cigarettes or the fact that he slept better here than he ever had in the German army. Otto wrote nothing. He sat on his bed, cleaning his boots, refusing to participate in what he called American tricks. They want us to tell our families that America is wonderful. Otto said, they want us to become traitors with our own words. I will not do it. The next morning, Rodriguez collected the letters from anyone who had written them. Werner watched carefully as Rodriguez glanced at each letter, barely reading them, just checking that they were not 40 pages long or covered in maps. Rodriguez stamped each letter with a red stamp that said "Pass by Censor" and dropped them into a mailbag. That is it, Werner asked in English. That is it, Rodriguez confirmed. Red Cross picks them up tomorrow. They go to Switzerland, then to Germany. Takes about 6 weeks, usually. You do not read them carefully? Rodriguez shrugged. I check for military information. Locations, troop movements, that kind of thing. I do not care if you tell your wife you miss her or if you complain about the food. Write what you want. Werner felt dizzy. In Germany, censors read every word. They checked for defeatism, for doubt, for any hint of disloyalty. People had been arrested for writing that they were tired of the war. People had been executed for less. Over the next weeks, the waiting was torture. Werner worked in the fields, ate his meals, lay awake at night, wondering if his letter had been destroyed, if Greta would ever receive it, if writing it had been a mistake. Around him, other prisoners debated in whispers. Some believed, like Otto, that this was an elaborate trap. Others argued that maybe, just maybe, the Americans really did follow different rules. The propaganda had called Americans weak and soft. Maybe that was actually true. Maybe that made them treat prisoners differently. In late July, news reached the camp about the war. The American guards talked about it openly, which shocked the Germans who were used to military secrecy. The Allies had landed in Normandy on June 6th. The invasion of France had begun. Germany was being pushed back on both fronts, east and west. Some prisoners celebrated quietly, hoping the war would end soon so they could go home. Others became angry and defiant, insisting Germany would still win. Otto was among the angry ones. He stopped speaking to prisoners who expressed doubt about victory. Then, on August 3rd, 1944, a truck arrived at the camp with mail. Real mail, with German stamps and postmarks that had traveled across the ocean through Switzerland. Lieutenant Carter called out names in his terrible pronunciation. Werner's name was called. Hans's name was called. 12 other names were called. Werner held the envelope with trembling hands. He recognized Greta's handwriting immediately. She had received his letter. She had written back. He walked to his barracks in a daze, sat on his bed, and carefully opened the envelope. The letter inside was 4 pages long. He started reading and immediately felt tears on his face. Werner read his wife's letter 3 times before his hands stopped shaking enough to share it with Hans and the others. The words Greta had written felt like they came from another world, a darker world that he had somehow escaped into this strange green prison in Iowa. She wrote about Hamburg burning. The British and American bombers came almost every night now, she said. The air raid sirens wailed, and everyone ran to the shelters. The city was becoming ruins and ash. Whole neighborhoods had been erased in firestorms. She described the smell of smoke that never left, the taste of dust in every meal, the sound of buildings collapsing in the night. But that was not what made Werner's chest tight with shock. It was what else she wrote. I do not know if we can win this war anymore. Greta had written in plain German on paper that had somehow traveled across battle lines to reach him. The officials keep saying victory is certain, but everyone is hungry and afraid. Frau Hoffmann down the street said she wished it would just end, and the next day, the Gestapo took her away. No one knows where she is now. I am careful what I say out loud. But Werner, I can write the truth to you because you are far away and maybe your censors do not care about the doubts of one tired woman in Hamburg. Werner stared at those words. She had written criticism of the war. She had written doubt about victory. She had written about the Gestapo arresting people. And somehow, someway, her letter had passed through German censors and American censors and arrived in his hands with every dangerous word intact. He showed the letter to Hans, whose own letter from Munich told a similar story. Hans's mother wrote that his father had been killed at Stalingrad over a year ago, but the army had only recently confirmed it. She had known for months, but could not write it before because the censors blocked any negative news from reaching soldiers. She wrote about food rationing, about the Hitler Youth taking younger and younger boys, about neighbors who whispered that the war was lost. She said it. Hans whispered, his face pale. She said the war was lost. In a letter. And no one stopped it. That evening, 8 prisoners gathered quietly in the corner of the barracks after lights out. They spoke in whispers, sharing what their letters contained. Every letter told of hardship in Germany. Every letter contained honest words about fear, doubt, exhaustion, and suffering. And every letter had somehow passed through whatever censorship existed on both sides. Otto Brenner was not part of the gathering. He sat on his bed alone, still refusing to write, still insisting everything was a trick. But Werner noticed Otto was listening. "How is this possible?" asked a prisoner named Friedrich, who had received a letter from Berlin. "In Germany, you cannot say these things. You cannot write them. You cannot think them out loud. Maybe the Americans really do not care about our politics," Werner said slowly, testing the idea. "Maybe they only care about military secrets. Or maybe," said another prisoner named Dieter, "maybe the German censors are too busy now. Too many letters, not enough censors. The system is breaking down like everything else." Over the next 2 weeks, more letters arrived. Almost every prisoner who had written home received responses. The letters painted a picture of Germany that contradicted everything the propaganda had claimed. Food was scarce. Cities were bombed daily. The Russian army was pushing from the east. People were afraid. And people were writing these truths to their imprisoned sons and husbands, somehow trusting that the words would arrive. Werner wrote back to Greta, still cautious but more honest than before. He told her he was truly safe, that he had enough food, that the Americans treated him decently. He did not say he ate better than she did. He did not say he slept in a warm bed while she hid in bomb shelters. But he told her he was healthy and to not worry about him. Hans wrote to his mother every week. His letters became his lifeline, his only connection to the world he understood. He told her about the work, about the cornfields, about the small American town. He asked questions about neighbors, about family, about their apartment. He asked if she had enough coal for winter, if she could get bread, if she was safe to in mid-August. News reached the camp about a failed assassination attempt on Hitler. On July 20th, German officers had tried to kill the Führer with a bomb. They had failed. Hitler survived. The conspirators were being hunted and executed. The prisoners reacted in different ways to this news. Some, like Otto, were relieved Hitler survived and angry at the traitors who had tried to kill him. Others were quieter, more conflicted. Werner wondered if the war would have ended if the bomb had succeeded. He wondered if Greta would be safer if Hitler was dead. He did not say this out loud. But that night, he wrote it in a letter to his wife. He wrote one careful sentence. "I wonder if the events of July 20th might have changed our future." He did not explain further. He did not need to. Greta would understand. He gave the letter to Corporal Rodriguez the next morning, watching for any reaction. Rodriguez glanced at it, stamped it, and dropped it in the mailbag. If he had read that sentence about July 20th, he did not care. One evening, Otto finally broke his silence. He approached Werner while Werner was writing another letter. "I need paper," Otto said quietly. Werner looked up, surprised. Otto's face looked older than his 40 years, worn down by something invisible. "I need to write a letter," Otto continued. "Not to family. To someone else. Someone I wronged." "Who?" Otto sat down heavily on the bed. "Before the war, in 1938, I reported my neighbors to the authorities. They were Jews. I was a party member, and I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting Germany." He stopped, his voice cracking. "They were sent away. The parents, the 2 children. I do not know where they went. I do not know if they are alive." Werner said nothing, just listened. "I want to write to them," Otto said. "To their old address. Maybe someone will forward it. Maybe they will get it. I need to tell them I'm sorry. I need them to know that I was wrong." Werner handed Otto paper and pencil without a word. That night, Otto wrote his first letter. It was addressed to a family that might not exist anymore, seeking forgiveness for a sin that could never be erased. September arrived in Iowa with cooler winds and changing leaves. Werner had been a prisoner for 4 months now, and the strangeness had become routine. He worked on farms, ate 3 meals a day, and wrote letters to Greta every week. Each letter became more honest than the last. Each response from Hamburg revealed more truth about the war that Germany was losing. One afternoon, while harvesting soybeans on the Mackenzie farm, Werner made a decision that would have gotten him shot in Germany. He wrote a letter describing exactly what he saw in America. He described the abundance, the full stores, the healthy people. He described farmers throwing away food that was not perfect enough to sell. He described American workers complaining about minor inconveniences while German workers starved. He wrote the truth that propaganda had called lies. America is not weak, Werner wrote to Greta. America is not collapsing. Everything they told us was backwards. This country has more food, more factories, more everything than I can describe. We cannot win a war against this. We never could have one. He sealed the letter before he could change his mind. He gave it to Rodriguez, who stamped it without comment. The letter disappeared into the mail system, carrying dangerous truth across an ocean. Hans wrote similar letters to his mother in Munich. He described going to a movie in town under guard, watching a Western with cowboys and Indians, eating popcorn. He described playing football with other prisoners while American guards watched and cheered. He described a country that was not at all what they had been taught to expect. I do not hate them, Hans wrote. I try to hate them like we were supposed to, but I cannot. They're just people. Some are kind, some are not, just like us. Other prisoners grew bolder in their letters too. They described their doubts about the Nazi regime. They asked questions about Hitler's decisions. They wrote words that would have meant death in Germany, but seemed to mean nothing to the American censors. Corporal Rodriguez sometimes sat with Werner during breaks from work. Rodriguez spoke better German than Lieutenant Carter, and he seemed genuinely interested in the prisoners' stories. Why do you let us write whatever we want? Werner asked him one day. Rodriguez lit a cigarette and offered one to Werner. Because we want your families to know you are alive and treated well. We want them to see that we follow the rules. Maybe some of your families will tell their neighbors. Maybe some Germans will hear that America is not the monster your government said we are. So it is propaganda, Werner said. Everything is propaganda in war, Rodriguez replied. But it is also true. We really do follow the Geneva Convention. We really do treat you decently. The truth serves our purpose, so we let you write it. Werner thought about this logic. It was cynical and honest at the same time. The Americans were not being kind just to be kind. They were being kind because it was useful. But that did not change the fact that he was not beaten, not starved, not tortured. The motivation did not change the reality that in October, news reached the camp that the Russian army had entered East Prussia. Germany itself was being invaded for the first time. The prisoners received this news with dread. Everyone knew what the Russian army did to German territory. Everyone had heard the stories from soldiers retreating from the east. Werner received a letter from Greta that month that chilled his blood. Soviet armies were pushing toward Berlin from the east, while American and British armies pushed from the west. Hamburg was between them, still being bombed regularly. Greta wrote that she was trying to decide whether to stay in the city or flee to the countryside. Both options seemed dangerous. Klaus asks about you every day, she wrote. I show him your letters. He is proud his father is brave enough to tell the truth. He does not understand everything, but he knows you are honest. That matters more than I can say right now, when everything else is lies. Werner read that sentence 5 times. His letters, his honest words, were teaching his son something important. In a world of propaganda and fear, simple truth was becoming an act of courage. Hans received terrible news in November. His mother wrote that their apartment building had been hit by a bomb. She survived because she was in the shelter, but everything they owned was destroyed. Every photograph, every piece of furniture, every memory of Hans's childhood was now ash and rubble. She was living with strangers in a basement, sharing one room with 3 other families. Hans broke down crying when he read the letter. Werner and others tried to comfort him. But what could they say? They were safe and fed while their family suffered. The guilt was crushing, Otto continued writing his letters to the Jewish family he had wronged. He never received a response, but he wrote every week anyway. His letters became confessions, describing his actions in the Nazi Party, his beliefs that had seemed right at the time, his growing understanding of how wrong he had been. I helped destroy people's lives because I thought I was saving Germany. Otto wrote in one letter that Werner saw. I was so certain. I was so stupid. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I need you to know that some of us see what we did. Some of us understand now. Otto's transformation was painful to watch. He had been so certain, so committed to Nazi ideology. Now, that certainty was collapsing, and there was nothing underneath it. He walked around the camp like a ghost, doing his work, writing his letters, saying little in December. As snow-covered Iowa and Christmas approached, the prisoners learned that Germany had launched a desperate offensive in Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge, the Americans called it. Hitler was throwing everything into one last attack, trying to split the Allied armies and reach the port of Antwerp. Werner knew what this meant. Germany was not trying to win anymore. Germany was just trying not to lose, trying to make the war so expensive that the Allies would negotiate peace. It was a fantasy. Everyone could see it except perhaps Hitler himself. That Christmas was the strangest of Werner's life. The camp held a celebration with a tree, decorations, and songs. American guards and German prisoners sang Silent Night, together in two languages, the same melody carrying different words toward the same sky. Werner wrote to Greta that night, describing the impossible scene of enemies celebrating peace on Earth while war raged across the ocean. He wondered if she would live to see another Christmas. He wondered if he would ever see her in Klaus again. The winter of 1945 was brutal in Iowa, but it was nothing compared to the brutality unfolding in Europe. Werner received letters from Greta that described a Hamburg barely recognizable as a city. More bombing, more death, more hunger. The Russians were getting closer from the east. Everyone was afraid. In January, the Battle of the Bulge ended in German defeat. Hitler's last offensive had failed completely. The American guards talked about it openly, showing newspapers to the prisoners. The photos showed destroyed German tanks, captured German soldiers, the unstoppable advance of Allied armies. Some prisoners still insisted Germany would find a way to win. Others had stopped pretending. Werner wrote to Greta with a heavy heart. "The war will end soon," he wrote. "We both know how it will end. I do not know what comes after, but I know I want to face it with you and Klaus. Please stay alive. Please keep him safe. Nothing else matters." Hans received a letter in February that changed him. His mother wrote that food was so scarce in Munich that people were eating grass and tree bark. Children were dying of hunger in the streets. The Nazi officials who had promised victory and glory had fled, leaving everyone else to suffer. She wrote these things plainly, without code, without fear anymore. What did censorship matter when the world was ending? "Come home when you can," she wrote to Hans. "If you can. We need you. Germany will need everyone who survived to rebuild whatever is left." In March, American armies crossed the Rhine River into the heart of Germany. The news reached Camp Clarinda through official channels and through letters from home. Greta wrote that she could hear artillery in the distance now. The front was approaching Hamburg. She and Klaus were hiding in the cellar most days. Werner read her letter and felt physically sick. He was safe in Iowa, eating regular meals, sleeping in a warm bed, while his wife and son huddled underground waiting for shells to fall. The injustice of it made him want to scream that he wrote back immediately, though he knew the mail system was probably breaking down. "I love you," he wrote. "Tell Klaus I love him. Survive. Just survive. I will find you when this is over." Otto finally received a response to his letters in late March. The envelope was worn and had been forwarded multiple times. It was from a Jewish organization in Switzerland. Inside was a brief note explaining that the family Otto had written to had perished in Auschwitz in 1943. Parents, children, all gone. But the organization thanked Otto for his letters, saying they were proof that some Germans felt remorse, that some Germans understood what had been done. Otto read the letter alone in his bunk. He did not cry. He did not speak. He just laid down and stared at the ceiling for hours. Werner checked on him that evening. "They are dead," Otto said flatly. "Everyone I wrote to is dead. Because of me. Because of people like me. You cannot bring them back," Werner said quietly. "But you told the truth. That matters." "Does it?" Otto asked. "Does truth matter when everyone is dead?" Werner had no answer for that. On April 12th, news arrived that shocked even the prisoners. President Roosevelt had died. The American guards seemed genuinely sad. Werner realized that Roosevelt had been their president for 12 years, leading them through depression and war. The prisoners did not mourn Roosevelt, but they recognized that something significant had shifted. Later that same month, much bigger news came. The Americans and Russians had met at the Elbe River, cutting Germany in half. Berlin was surrounded. Hitler was trapped in his bunker. The end was days away, maybe hours. That on April 30th, word spread through the camp that Hitler was dead. Suicide in his bunker as Russian soldiers closed in. The Führer, who had promised a 1,000-year Reich, had lasted 12 years and destroyed Germany in the process. The prisoners reacted in different ways. Some refused to believe it. Some were relieved. Some wept for the end of everything they had believed in. Otto said nothing at all. He just went back to his bunk and lay down. On May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. The guards announced it in the morning. Some prisoners cheered that the killing was done. Others sat in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of defeat. Germany had lost everything. The Third Reich was finished. Werner received a letter from Greta 3 weeks later, one of the first to get through after the surrender. Her handwriting was shaky, but it was her handwriting. She was alive. Klaus was alive. Hamburg was occupied by British soldiers now. They had very little, but they were alive. "Your letters saved us," Greta wrote. "I shared them with neighbors who were ready to die fighting when the British came. I showed them what you wrote about America, about how prisoners were treated. Some of them put down their weapons because of your words. Some of them chose to live instead of dying for nothing. You were far away, but you still saved lives, Werner. You saved lives with truth." Werner read that letter until the words blurred. His simple, honest descriptions of life in America had traveled across an ocean and changed minds. His refusal to lie, his small act of writing truth, had mattered. Hans learned his mother had survived. He would be able to return to Munich eventually and help her rebuild. Otto learned there was nothing to return to. His family was gone, his town destroyed. He decided to stay in America if they would let him. There was nothing for him in Germany except ghosts and guilt. Lieutenant Carter called the officers together in June to explain the future. Some prisoners would be sent home soon. Others would stay longer to work while Germany was rebuilt. Eventually, everyone would return unless they requested otherwise. Werner requested return to Hamburg. He wanted to go home to Greta and Klaus. He wanted to help rebuild Germany into something better, something honest, something that valued truth over propaganda. That on a warm evening in July, Werner wrote his last letter from Camp Clarinda. He thanked Lieutenant Carter for treating them with humanity. He thanked Corporal Rodriguez for letting them write the truth. He explained that being allowed to write honestly, to communicate without censorship, had changed him more than any punishment could have. "You gave us something we did not have in Germany," Werner wrote. "You gave us the freedom to tell the truth. That small freedom made us remember we were human beings, not just soldiers or prisoners or enemies. Thank you for that gift." He mailed the letter to Greta, his final message from Iowa. Then he packed his few belongings and prepared to go home to a destroyed country that needed honest men to rebuild it. The war was over. The real work was about to begin.